Hey, everybody. Thanks for stopping in and joining our live coverage, our ongoing coverage of Hurricane Delta. It is expected to make landfall, you all, within this hour. In fact, during this live stream, we think that this hurricane will actually make the landfall over Louisiana, and we hope to bring that to you live. We have a lot to unpack here. Joining me is meteorologist Stephanie Lauber, and we're going to be unpacking all things Delta in these coming minutes. I'll let you know the latest info from the Hurricane Center. We know that the Eyewall has already come onshore. We're waiting for the technical landfall, which would mean that the center of that eye has to cross the plane of land for it to be a technical landfall. So we think that's going to happen very soon. Winds are down to around 100 miles an hour, but we've had winds already at hurricane force in gusts along the coastline of southern Louisiana, and we're going to show you some live wind as well in just a second. So we'll get our bearings here. I'll let Steph say a quick hello, and then we'll get right to it. So Steph, what are you seeing on your end? And then let's talk to Jim Tang as well.
Hey, Leslie, you know, it's been a busy day. You've had a really busy week too. And as we were talking earlier with Mike, this has been one that's just blown records out of the water here. Delta, now our 26th storm of the season. We've gone past the regular names. We're now in the Greek names. And everybody, just so you know, this is only the second time we've been in the Greek alphabet, the first being in 2005. That season ended with Zeta. So now at this point, we're dealing with just two more names until we catch up to 2005. But in terms of time, our Delta formed a bit earlier, about a month earlier, and it's definitely packing a punch here as it approaches. And we're waiting, as Leslie said, to make its landfall here very shortly on the Gulf coastline.
Yeah, and you know, Stephanie, you and I were talking about this, and we apologize, you guys. We wanted to get on a little bit earlier, but in our quest to get the latest info for you, we've tried to turn some video around really quickly within minutes of us getting it. And it's, as you may know, it's really hard to get video in or out of Louisiana, needless to say, cell service. But we do have some video that we want to show you from our storm chaser that's on the ground in Lake Arthur. Now, this is from storm chaser Jim Tang. He is right in the center of where we think that eye is going to cross, and he just sent this over to us. So let's go ahead and roll that, Damien.
I'm at Lake Arthur right now. The Eyewall of Hurricane Delta is on the coast. Waves are pounding this area. Winds are increasing in strength. We are about to get the full force of the Eyewall. I'm at Lake Arthur right now. The Eyewall of Hurricane Delta is on the coast. Waves are pounding this area. Winds are increasing in
Okay,
strength.
so as you saw from that video, you guys, you can see that the water had already risen behind Jim where he is, and we got some word from the National Hurricane Center that we've already seen a surge around 7 feet in parts of Louisiana. So let me get this right and put my little readers on here. So the NOAA level freshwater gauge at the freshwater canal reported a storm surge inundation of 7 feet above ground level. So that's not where Jim is. Jim's in Lake Arthur, but again, we think that ground zero, for lack of a better word, is going to be near Cameron or very near Lake Arthur, and or Esterville is another one that I've seen a lot of storm chasers at. So we're very, very close to that landfall, and we also have a couple of pieces of video that Jim shot. So Damien, you can just go ahead, and Damien McFarland is pushing our buttons for us tonight. Thanks, Damien, for handling a big load. So let's go ahead and take a look at the stuff that that Jim shot, not the Hurricane Laura. There you go. No, one more. Back to what Jim Tang shot us earlier. That would be in Lake Arthur. You have some of the damage video that he shot. Keep scrolling back on your layer there, Damien. You'll see. There you go. So go ahead and show that one. So this was about an hour to 90 minutes ago, Jim storm chasing there for us. And the winds have picked up significantly, of course. We expect to see that only deteriorate. Even though the actual eye itself has degenerated, that is the best case scenario for the folks in Louisiana. But we're still expecting that storm surge. I've been talking about this most of the week, that I think the big headline out of this hurricane is going to be the storm surge. I know Mike and Stephanie were talking about that as well, because this is going to be, it's an expanding tropical cyclone, and that means more geography, more real estate will be impacted from that surge. So we've got some video as well of Jim as he was headed into the Lake Arthur area, and heavy rain there. That's the other component to this, of course. We always talk about the risks and the weather hazards. Everybody seems to want to know what the winds are, but there's so many other factors, including rain and freshwater flooding, which is the number one killer of people that don't evacuate and they get flooded out, and flash floods become a huge issue, Steph.
Yeah, and something that one of our Twitter followers, I saw they posted earlier, they're outside the Houston metro area in Liberty, Texas. So that's our friend out there, Justin, who was showing that we had some limbs down off palm trees there because of some of the gusts that they've been getting earlier today. So, that's right up the alley, what we've been talking about, where it's not necessarily the core of the storm, the heavy hitting stuff that's so widespread, but if you're somewhere as far as Pensacola, Mobile Bay, Gulf Shores, you're going to feel that something's not right. Something's going on. There's definitely a storm nearby. And so we have seen those impacts, as much as 1 to 3 feet of storm surge expected on either side of Delta. So Mobile Bay or back towards Galveston Bay and on the Barrier Island there. So definitely some far-reaching impacts for folks on either side of Delta. It is a bigger storm size-wise than what we saw with Laura, and taking up about half the size of the Gulf of Mexico. It's pretty expansive, and it just goes to show that the size of the hurricane doesn't necessarily mean what the intensity would be specifically, but the fact that the storm has begun to weaken, which is a great silver lining that has really helped folks here along the Gulf Coast. That all that energy has to go somewhere, so it expands outward. That wind field goes outward. We saw in the National Hurricane Center's 5 p.m. Eastern Time update that those tropical storm force winds extend out as far as 160 miles from the center of Delta. So that's the reason why we got those tropical storm warnings that flank either side of where the center will be moving onshore, which again, it's not going to be long before we see that happen here, probably as we're talking about the storm going on, Leslie.
Yeah, let's, Damien, while she was talking about the storm surge, I wanted to pop up WSI. So let's go back to WSI real quick, and we'll take a look at the official storm surge readings from the National Hurricane Center. And this is what Steph was talking about. So right in Vermilion Bay, New Iberia is where the greatest risk for that highest surge is, 7 to 11 feet. And then as Steph was talking about, if you flank out there towards the right, we're still looking at 4 to 6 feet over to the boot there, and the heel, as Steph likes to call it, of Louisiana. 4 to 6 feet, and then maybe, I think this might be a tad overdone, but 1 to 2 feet over in Mobile Bay, I think is certainly doable. Stephanie mentioned earlier before we came on that the tide is outgoing right now, so that is a better case scenario for those folks anywhere that's along the Gulf Coast. We want an outgoing tide and not an ingoing tide, because we get a surge and then we get a storm tide, which is the surge on top of the astronomical tide, which even brings in more water for areas that are going to get inundated from the surge already. So good to know that the tide is outgoing. And then back over on the left side, you can see towards Cameron, again, about 4 to 7 feet there, 2 to 4 over into the Galveston Bay. We talked about this last night, that based on the end point or the entry of Delta, we're going to see some of the water come on the backside, push that water out of Galveston Bay and then back into the Gulf. So we could see some interesting video coming out of there, like we saw with Laura. This is not the same structure of Laura. Laura was a powerful Cat 4, not minimizing this hurricane by any means, but we'll see how that plays out in terms of Galveston Bay and what they get. And then over by Port Lavaca back to 1 to 3. So let me pop up real quick, Steph, and then I'm going to bring you back. I just wanted to see what the winds are doing in this area. So we've got live weather stations, METAR stations, all across the Gulf Coast, but we also have buoys that are offshore. So let me zoom this in, and we'll take a look at the live. These are the sustained winds. These are not the gusts. I went ahead and put the live winds on here, so I got to put on my reader so I can read them. In Texas, anywhere from 10 to 15, as you can see there, Galveston up to 28. But look at that South Marsh. That's a buoy just off the coast of Lake Arthur, where Jim Tang is. The winds sustained at 52. And then a couple of the stations not reporting. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. Let's take a look at New Iberia, sustained wind of 39. We've got New Orleans sustained at 32. Several of the buoys there, 25, 26. But the Hurricane Center, again, referenced. Let me just get back. And Steph, if you get an official call, I keep trying to check. If you get an official call,
I'm
please let me know.
here to see see what we get. It's going to be close.
So the one of the buoys reported a sustained wind, a gust of 78. That was just near Cameron, Louisiana, which again we think is going to be very near that entry point. So let's take a look at the radar. I'm going to show you the WSI radar that I'm going to hand it over to Steph to take a look at the app. So you can see the presentation of that eye just open up. It's only it was at one point closed off, but you can see it's opened up almost 50%. The Hurricane Center talked about that in their discussion at 5 o'clock today. So again, that is a better scenario, much better scenario for this area of Louisiana. We saw Laura stay intact, and Stephanie, I know you talked about the storm surge, and I think you were right. I think it was 17.2 feet was the technical. I don't know. Did you ever look that up to see what the surge was, Laura? I think it was 17, like you mentioned.
No, I was trying to go back to an official source from the survey from the folks in Lake Charles out there when they went and eventually made it out to the coastline, because as you know, and folks, you've seen our video out there where it was just difficult to maneuver around the area with Laura after that came through. So it was a doozy out there once that storm went through. And as we noticed with this storm, it's kind of tough to get some radar readings of the magnitude that we'd like to, because the Lake Charles radar is still down. They were in the process of repairing it, and this storm just came about a month later. So I think we're within a couple days of the 1 month mark of Laura now. So with that, it just goes to show that it's been a very active season for folks in this area of the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I know you guys and I know you guys talked about this too, but it just bears repeating, just the unprecedented nature of so many landfalling cyclones in the northern Gulf Coast. I think, as you mentioned, this is, I think, the fourth one in that region. I may be wrong on that, but at least in this general vicinity of Louisiana, we're talking about the fourth one, 10th named storm of the total hurricane season for the United States. So these folks need a break for about 30 years or more after this season. It's just been unbelievable. But I've got the reflectivity showing the rain rates there. I just talked on some rain rates while Stephanie was talking, and you can see, some of those numbers anywhere from a half of an inch or just a bit more. But you have to remember, we're just now getting the Eyewall that's just crossed that plain, and we're going to see those feeder bands throughout tonight, through the overnight, and those are the ones that really pack those heavy rains. That's such a big concern with the flooding risk, as we head through these overnight hours, on top of the fact that we have a not well organized Eyewall, but we're still going to see those core winds around 100 miles an hour impact, and that small core that looks like it's going to be very near Cameron or just to the east of that. It's hard to say, but we're going to see that right in that area, and again, that storm surge. So Steph, what are you seeing on the radar here tonight that you want to point out?
Something I'd like to point out that's really well demonstrated in the app. We've got our radar, and again, like we said, the Lake Charles radar is down, but we've got global radar data going into the app, so it makes tracking a breeze. And you can see here, as the Eyewall begins to deteriorate, you see that very beginning of the eastward jog, so to speak, along the coastline. You and I were talking about this before we came on, that it does make a bit of a bump for the NHC when they go to look at this and call the exact moment when we get that landfall, because it's hard to do that when you're relying on the center of circulation and it's not obvious on satellite and your radars are a bit farther away. But either way, the fact that we're having these issues, or I should say the storm is having these issues, is great news for the folks that are here in the vicinity of the center and in the Eyewall. As we saw, Jim, it was a pretty rough go for folks out there on the ground. But in the radar, you can still see we got some pockets of red, some yellows, showing you very heavy rainfall. Those are the stronger rain showers involved in that Eyewall. And something that isn't so obvious that this radar tells us about is how the rainfall has drastically dropped off on that left-hand side of the storm, the west side. So we've been watching for some drier air in the atmosphere to start wrapping into the storm, and that's helped kind of disrupt that stronger eye wall we saw about 12 to 18 hours ago, and it just evaporates the rain on the western side of that. So folks in to the parts of Texas such as Beaumont or going as far south as Houston, we're seeing rain earlier on today, and it's kind of dropped off here because we're just getting things to evaporate, especially as the storm moves on land. We get that disruption in the circulation, and we begin to see things kind of stretch in a diagonal form, which if you zoom out a little bit here, Leslie, we can really see the expanse of the rainfall, and it's kind of taken on this oval shape across the northern Gulf Coast here to just show you it's dragging that moisture. The trough that's going to be somewhat picking up this storm and directing it across the Mississippi River Valley is really beginning to draw that moisture out and elongate the circulation, which again is helping to tear the storm apart, weaken it, and deteriorate the organization of this low pressure system, which is in the past, I'd say 4 hours since our earlier update, we've dropped down. We're almost on that lower end of Cat 2, where earlier we were still a healthy Cat 3. So this is great news for folks here, but it could be better. We'll be a lot happier when this drops down to Category 1 here, which I think as soon as it comes on shore, we'll likely see that. But something else, can we look at some of those velocities there, Leslie, and take a look at what's going on at those stations? I believe the radar closest to there is KPOE. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, yep. So we're beginning to see some opposing winds here with the red and the green.
Sorry, and, the radar, the app's doing its thing,
it's
so I apologize.
It just wants to zoom right in.
Let me see if that'll refix itself. Oh goodness, yeah, we've got this thing where we're using the iPad and it for some reason it does this like incredibly radical zoom, so it's trying to
aggressively.
It's trying to, yes, Damien says it's very detailed. It's trying to load. I'm not sure what's going on, Steph. I'm only got that one tile you see there. Let me see if it'll.
If you didn't blink, hopefully you didn't miss it. We had that a bit of opposing wind moving on shore. Again, with this radar not being very close to the coastline there, it's hard to tell what kind of rotation that might be happening along the coastline, the immediate coastline by Cameron, and going out towards Lake Arthur. It's not very obvious because the radar's farther away. As the beam goes out, it moves upward in altitude. It gets taller. That beam goes upward as it moves out away from the radar. So it's not obvious what's going on very close in the surface. So with the Lake Charles radar being down, it'll be hard to spot some of those tornadoes that might be happening along the immediate coastline. But still, folks here are taking it right now as the storm moves on shore. And let's do another little refresh here and see if we've got an update. Not seeing anything coming through. But look, we've got our radar back up.
It came back, yeah. And Damien, if it does that again, let's just pull up WSI, because for some reason the iPad's being really sensitive right now. I'm not really sure. So if we see that go to black again, let's pop up WSI and while I try and figure that out. All right, Steph, if you wanted to talk about, you were talking about the, going towards the radar sites with the green and the going away from the radar site. So we are clearly see that in the velocity.
The green goes in and the red goes out. So where you see these couplets, they're called, of green and red twisting around each other. You might think that would be the case here on the left side of the screen. You see that pocket of green within the red. I wouldn't be so quick to say that is rotation. I think that's just a factor of the eyewall falling apart there. And if we take this back to the regular radar, not velocity, but
reflectivity.
I'm forgetting my terms today. Yes, reflectivity. There we go. Words are hard sometimes. So yeah, we're starting to see looks like two bands kind of catching up to each other there, right in that spot where we had that pocket of green on the left hand side of the radar there. So it just goes to show storm's not looking that healthy, and it's still packing a punch because it does take a while for these things to dissipate. But this is good news for the folks along the coastline here, a silver lining that we're not getting such an intense storm rolling through, but these people are already recovering from the last storm, so that makes you more vulnerable, something that we discussed in an earlier update is that the difference for the Louisiana coastline and the reason why these storms are more of a threat is because, as Leslie has mentioned before, a lot of this coastline is just wetlands. So it's not like where on the Texas side of things you have a couple barrier islands that go across Galveston, and Padre Island is a barrier island for Corpus Christi and folks there, and all around Florida we've got that a number of barrier islands and intercoastals along the Sunshine State and up there. So Louisiana really vulnerable just because of the kind of landmass that's out there. So and when you have a 1-2 punch with these storms, it really hits hard for folks here. So definitely not downplaying this scenario, but it's great news that we've seen the storm fall apart.
Yeah, and you can really see that too on the infrared. Let's switch over to that, Damien, because it's just looking very sloppy. And I was going to say not uncharacteristic for an October cyclone. I mean, we have certainly seen powerful cyclones in the month of October. I'm not diminishing that, but climatologically, some of these storms tend to kind of present themselves like this, where they look incredibly powerful on infrared a few days before landfall. I remember, we all know when the winds were topped at 145 about 4 days ago, and then we've seen it degenerate, and then it's just collapsing right now as it interacts with the U.S. So best case scenario, we've been saying that's not minimizing the risk. I do think, and as we've been trying to point out, the surge is going to be a big problem for this region of the country, and we're still going to be talking about this all weekend. So there's the latest info from the Hurricane Center. Winds at 100. I know without a doubt that's going to be knocked down at the next advisory, because it's just fallen apart, thankfully. But likely to see that get a downtick from the Hurricane Center. Pressure up to 968. So officially, that north to northeast component has been the factor the last couple of hours. Hurricane Center thinks that's going to turn more due north and accelerate towards the northeast as we head into overnight tonight, and once that trough really kicks it out of here. Again, better case scenario, less time over land to stack up those rain totals to a significant amount. But as Stephanie mentioned earlier in the day today, several areas in this part of the region have already seen multiple inches of rain, 3-4 inches in some of the pockets, and they're going to tack on another 4 to 5. So that's where we're concerned. And the National Weather Service did a great job in preemptively trying to prepare folks, and the flash flood watches were issued statewide, I think, yesterday, or actually 2 days ago, for Louisiana and parts of Mississippi. So the official path as of 5 o'clock, you can see it here, again, curving pretty significantly back towards the right through the southern Tennessee River Valley. A lot of folks I know have been asking about Tennessee, and you're going to get a much lesser form, of course, than the folks in Louisiana are going to get. But you still have that risk of the flooding and the wind, because you're still going to get in that neighborhood 35, 40 miles an hour in some gusts. That's enough to topple down some power lines that are susceptible. I think the larger risk for those power failures, by the way, is obviously going to be in Louisiana. And Damien and Stephanie, you and I can talk over this over the next couple minutes. Let's show some of that video from our full-time storm chaser, Aaron Jack, who covered for us